Welcome to this evening's program. I'm Sue Siglowski. I'm the Executive Director for the Vermont School Boards Association. And I would like to introduce the rest of the staff who are also on the call. We have Amy Callan, who's the Director of Operations, who's been making sure everyone gets in the right places tonight. Sandra Cameron, Associate Executive Director, and Debbie Singeiser, the Director of Board Services. And we're very glad you could join us tonight. I would also like to thank our panelists for this evening's program, who are the co-chairs of the School District Redistricting Task Force, Senator Martine LaRocque-Gulick and Representative Edie Granning. Both of these dedicated public servants are school board members in addition to being legislators and serving on the Redistricting Task Force, so they are very busy. We'll begin their presentation with some slides and some information about the task force, and then we're going to have a question and answer session with many of the questions that you all submitted ahead of time. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Senator LaRocque-Gulick and Representative Granning.
Hi, everybody. My name is Martine LaRocque-Gulick. As you heard, I represent Chittenden Central, which is Burlington, Winooski, Essex Junction, some of Essex Town, a little sliver of Colchester. And I serve on the Burlington School Board. I have for about 8 years, I believe. And I serve as Vice Chair of the Health and Welfare Committee, and I'm on the Finance Committee. And I look forward to talking to you about the endeavor that we have taken on as vice chairs, or sorry, co-chairs of the Redistricting Committee.
Hi, everybody. I'm Edie Granning. I represent Jericho and Underhill. I currently chair the Mount Mansfield Unified Union School Board, and I am the vice chair of the Commerce and Economic Development Committee in the House. And co-chair with Martine on the task force, as everyone has said, and why we're here. And I'm glad to have all of your questions and talk about this big job.
Sue, would you like us to speak to the slides, or?
Yes, please.
Okay, so as you can see, I think the previous, can you go back, Sue? One? Okay, that was just the title page with, this is a map, obviously, of the state of Vermont, but it's one of the many iterations that you can put together on the mapping tool that is available for everyone to try out. And we will point you in the direction of where you can find that at some point this evening. Go ahead, Sue.
Go ahead,
Edie.
The task force is made up of 11 people, 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate, 2 appointees from the House, 2 appointees from the Senate, and 1 appointee from the governor. I'm sure as you look at this list, you see people's names that you know have been involved in education. We have a former state Board of Education member. We have a former Secretary of Education, 2 former Secretaries of Education on the committee, a former president of one of our state colleges, a couple of former superintendents, some former teachers, school board members, as you've heard. So people who are deeply committed and involved in education and have incredibly deep knowledge on education in Vermont.
The purpose of the task force, as you all know, H454 came out of the legislature this past year. And after a lot of work and went to a conference committee, and there was a lot of, it wasn't an easy vote and it wasn't an easy process, I'll put it that way. And then it ended up as Act 73. And as part of Act 73, the the school district redistricting task force was formed, and that is what Edie and I are working on. That is the charge of that task force is what we are currently working on, which is to come up with up to 3 maps to present to the legislature, as well as a report on December 1st that kind of summarizes all of the work that we've done throughout the 5 months of work of the task force.
So we have already met 3 to 4 times. Is that right? We have 4 more meetings to go. We have added two additional opportunities for community engagement. So we will have a total of 4 of those in addition to 8 meetings. So originally we thought we would have 8 meetings, including the community engagement portions, but we have realized that there's so much work to do and we really need to be in the community to talk to the community. So we have added meetings for that. At our own volunteer time, I want to make that really clear. We get paid for 8 meetings, full stop. We don't get paid for the extra 4 meetings that we've been added, that we have chosen. And as you all, most of you are volunteers, you know how it is. The work has to get done, so you do extra time to get the work done. So just wanted to share that. So we appreciate that you gave us questions in advance, and Sue is going to read some of them. I think we tried to bucket them into categories. And so if you sent in a question and Sue doesn't exactly read your question, please know that there were probably 3 others that were very similar, and Sue tried to pick the one that was the most representative and would give us the most opportunity to share information with all of you.
Can I just say a few other things before we get going, just to set the table a little bit? I don't want to speak for Edie, but I think many of you know that, I did not vote for H454. I was not in support of the bill. And I certainly was not in support of the process, especially after it came out of the conference committee. So I am entering into this work, obviously, with a lot of, misgivings, frankly, about this particular process. I wanted the task force to be made up of educational experts, and I wanted it to have a very different timeline, a longer timeline. I wanted the implementation of any change that actually will occur to be longer. So I am really committed actually to working in good faith and to come up with a product that I can feel proud of and that we can feel proud of when we hand it over to the legislature. But I also just want to make sure that you all understand that this is not easy work. It's not, it doesn't always feel very realistic. And I enter it really, with a critical mind and wanting to do my best, but also knowing the Herculean task that we have in front of us, and the fact that it is a very political process as well. So thank you for your questions and also for understanding the context.
And I'm just going to say that yes to what Martine said. I also didn't vote for this bill. I also think that it was rushed. I think that 4 months is not enough time to overhaul a system of education that has taken many, many, many years to develop. We don't have enough time to put maps together and then get feedback and then modify the maps, which would have been the right way to do this. But we were asked to be on the task force, and we're going to do the best we can with the time that we have, with the information that we have, and with the great minds in the room. And so we appreciate any grace that you can give us, because we are truly working in good faith on this and trying to find a way to give us hope for the future of education in Vermont and to change a system that is not working in all parts of the state to something that will.
Thank you. We'll get started with the questions now. And the first couple questions have to do with improving the ability of local school board members to share useful and timely information with their communities. So the first one is, when will boards get useful information to be shared with the community? Currently, with so many unknowns, we have been hesitant to share information with the community in fear of causing confusion.
Can I interrupt real quick? If the question and answer slide is going to maintain, can we go back to a full screen of participants? Cool, thank you.
Good
My
idea.
video's not even on, but thanks.
Good idea. So I would say that we probably, in all, in realistically, we won't have sort of like a finished product until our last meeting. And so we're probably looking at November. Um, and I want to remind folks that whatever it is we end up with, it has to go to the legislature to be voted on, right? So just because we are presenting maps does not mean that it's a done deal. So I know this is a stressful process, and I know a lot of folks are feeling very anxious, rightfully so. But it is a process. And so whatever we come up with, the report and the maps will go to the legislature, and it will really be on them to make the decisions. So I wanted you all to know that and put that into context. In terms of how you can disseminate information to your communities, I would definitely point folks in the direction of the website that we have. It is loaded with a lot of good material, and you can do everything from watch our whole meeting, which I don't necessarily recommend because they're long, and we're not a board, right? We're a task force, so we're doing work in real time. But I would recommend that folks read some of our guiding documents as we go through. We've taken a lot of time to, first of all, identify what the problem is that we're trying to solve. We've spent a lot of time thinking about what goals that we have. And we've spent a lot of time coming up with a template that we're going to use. So anytime someone comes forth with a map, we put it through this template and we try to answer all the questions related to the map and the consequences that the map could bring to the state of Vermont. We tried it out in one of our early meetings. We used the Hawaii model of one district. This was not a map that we were condoning in any way, but we wanted to put it through the template process to see if it worked. So I wanted to let folks know. But obviously, you're welcome to share with your communities what you feel is appropriate at any given time. And we'll talk a little bit later about our public engagement hearings.
The second question in this section is, we have heard rumblings from local legislators that there is a belief that the redistricting will fail and nothing will happen this year. Do you feel confident that the work you are doing can result in an acceptable outcome?
So we have also heard people making comments about what they want, what they don't want, whether something will happen, whether something won't. The legislature is made up of 180 people who all have who have many different communities to represent, and they have different guiding principles, different goals, and so it's amazing that we actually get anything done if you think about it. But we are going to do our part. We're going to do the task force job. We're going to put up to 3 maps together that we think will benefit education in Vermont. And then it goes to the legislature, and it has to go through the education committees, and it has to go through the finance committees, and they have to do their due diligence too. So they've asked us to do the beginning. The legislature is going to get together and do the end. I know in the House, there is a lot of political will and a lot of desire to do this and to go forward with good positive change for education for Vermont. And that's the best that we can, people ask me this all the time and say people are talking, and I say my crystal ball is cloudy, right? Like I can't tell you what's going to happen in January or February or April of next year, but I can tell you we're going to do our best to put work in front of the legislature that they can use to do positive things for education in Vermont.
And Sue, I know we have a lot of questions to get through. I just want to quickly add, along with the maps, we are going to have a very dense report that we're going to send to the legislature. And that report is going to tell a story, right? It is going to talk about the complexity of our system and some of the weaknesses of our system and things that we can think about in the future. It's going to talk hopefully about school facilities, et cetera. So the report along with the maps I want to say it's not going to fail because it's going to do something, right? We are going to produce a product. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. The next set of questions has to do with local community engagement on redistricting issues. And the first one is, how do you think that you can determine the best way to configure new districts without actually talking to the existing districts? Anyone can draw a map, but I think you need info from the districts, especially those districts that serve towns in more than one county.
Edie, you want me to go or yeah? So was that a two-pronged question? Was the first question about engagement, our hearings, the public hearings?
Yeah, well, we've got a bunch of questions after that about when will the public hearings be held and when will local conversations for families be held.
Okay,
So you
so
can answer all of that together if you want.
I'll get to that in a little bit, but I will say, in terms of, when do we talk with the districts? Well, first of all, I'm not sure what a district is. Would it be talking to school boards, superintendents, teachers, parents? I mean, everybody, that's, for me, a district is a lot of different people and a lot of different, stakeholders. So I'm not sure what that question is asking, but the second part is just Edie and I will acknowledge we've been given a very unrealistic timeline. So we're doing the best that we can with the time that we have. I can tell you what we're doing with our public hearings. I'll also tell you that the VSBA has a survey that you've probably already seen. The Commission on the Future of Education is going to send out a survey. We have public comment at every one of our meetings, virtual and in person. And also we have an email address that anyone can write to at any time with public comment. And we're keeping a file and it's available for everyone to see on the webpage. So there are multiple ways for you to get in touch with us and for you to have your community speak to us as well.
I'm just going to add to that, the experts on our committee, really do know this. They know education in Vermont. There's at least one, if not more, that has been to every single school in Vermont. They've worked in all across the state. We're relying on them to share information, and we're relying on you to bring us information. So we can only do the best we can if we get the information that you have to share. So if you know something that you think we should know, please, please, please share it.
Thank you. The next set of questions all focus on the public forums and what are the dates and locations? Would you consider adding another one or two to the schedule? I think you did add a few to the schedule. So if you could just talk about those public forums, that would be great.
I'll just start by saying we just hired our facilitator at our last meeting on the 3rd. So our facilitators they are helping us come up with the agenda for our public hearings and the way they're going to be structured, et cetera. So we're in the process of doing that, but I can tell you that right now on October 10th, there will be a public hearing at Oxbow High School in Bradford. We're still working out the times, but it'll likely be early evening. They have an in-service that day, I believe. Rutland High School is also going to hold a public hearing sometime in October. We don't have the date set. We're looking at a location in Chittenden and Franklin County at the moment, and Leland and Gray High School in Townsend will be on Thursday, October 16th. So we have two dates, definite, Oxbow and Leland and Gray, and we're still working on the other two. But there is a document on our webpage called Public Hearings Draft Plan, and you can click on that to get some more information.
Yep. It's likely, but not finalized, that the Rutland meeting will be on the 22nd. So, and we're going to use the VSBA to help get the information out the second that these are finalized. So read your VSBA emails.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next question, which is, without information, how are we to inform an increasingly nervous community? It seems like actions are being rushed down several separate streams without any foresight and without knowledge of what is coming down the correlative streams.
So Act 73 is a gigantic piece of legislation. And there are many different groups that have taken on different parts of it to do the work because, in part, it's a short timeline. So, yes, you're accurate. There are lots of different things happening. You have the task force that we're talking about, you have the Commission on the Future of Public Education, you have another task force that is looking at district wards, voting wards, and how to change the districts. And their first meeting is tomorrow. So it's the job of the legislature to take all of the work that's done in the off session and make sense of it and put it into a bill that makes things better, right? That uses the best pieces and takes the experts' work and does that. So it's a lot to keep track of. It's hard for me to keep track of all of it, and I appreciate that there is some discomfort in that, a lot of discomfort in that. That's the timeline that we have been given. It's mostly from the executive branch, who has said that this is the timeline that we have to do it in. The legislature wanted a longer timeline to get this done, knowing the amount of work and what it takes to actually make big change.
Yeah, I would just add that I think it's important to sort of try to keep the anxiety at a minimal level. We are, again, working in good faith, doing our best. We're listening to folks who are speaking to us. The time for real engagement, I think, is going to be with your local senators and representatives when it's up to them to vote on a map. That is really when folks are going to have to be vocal and plugged in and speaking with their representatives. In the meantime, I would just advise folks kind of stay in touch with us and try to keep, a regular focus on what we're doing as best they can. But I don't think it's time to get, anxiety levels and fear accelerated in communities. And I also think that it is not our job to close schools. That is not part of the purview of our task force. So I know there are some questions that Sue will be sharing about closing schools. That's not our job. So I just want to allay those fears right now.
Thanks. The next one has to do with rural communities. Many in our community have expressed fear of redistricting decisions, causing us to lose the character of our rural schools and their integration in our mountain community. We'd like to understand how your committee plans to listen to the voice of our smaller populations and address the particular and unique needs our rural mountain area faces.
I think we've answered this one. I think we can I think we've answered this one, but I will say the Commission on the Future of Public Education is putting together a plan on what kind of input communities will be giving if there is a reason to close those schools, and they're still meeting to talk about that. That's one of their charges. So just to point folks in the direction if that's your most pressing concern.
Okay, the last question in this section is, given that the task force charge includes collecting public input, how will the task force work with the resolutions submitted by school boards to your public comment site based upon priorities identified at local public forums on Act 73 redistricting?
So yeah, that's part of our job that we're gonna keep figuring out, but we are taking into account all of the public comment that we get from all of the different sources, from our surveys, from our meetings, from the letters that are sent in to us, and that will be part of the report that goes to the legislature. We want to hear you.
Thank you. The next set of questions has to do with potential closure of small schools. And the first question is, given your stated values and goals to produce maps with local elementary schools, how will you take into account geographically isolated areas like Grand Isle County?
I would say that, again, we're listening. Public input, public comment is important. I think we're going to get to the topic of the 4,000 to 8,000 number at some point. But yeah, we're listening to voices and we're trying to do everything that we can do to be data driven and research driven, and also focused on the voices of what people we're hearing from. So that is where we're at for now in terms of rural schools and districts. We do have some folks on the task force too who live in very rural parts of the state, and they have been very good at representing their local communities and speaking up to what it's like to be working and living or learning in a rural part of the state. That's helpful to many of us.
Thank you. We have a few questions about the definition of small and sparse by necessity, about who, when, and how will that be determined, and what will those type of schools look like? Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, Act 73 has said that the State Board of Education must create rules on that, and those rules are due back December 1st. So we're waiting for the State Board of Education to take on that piece.
And there's a question about do you believe that operating schools small by choice is a cost driver in education in Vermont?
I'm not sure we want to talk about cost drivers today. I think we could spend a whole hour talking about that. Our job is to think about what the map for the future of Vermont looks like, because costs in part, right? The reason, I guess we didn't even really talk about this, did we? The reason everybody knows we started doing this, and the legislature and the governor and everyone said that this is an emergency and we have to fix it right now, is because our property taxes went up. And then the legislature has spent the last 5 years buying the cost of the property tax bill down. So spending more money from the general fund on that. And it feels like it's less of an emergency because our property tax bills are more stable. While we were looking at this the legislature was looking at this and trying to understand what's going on, the issue of the fact that there is incredibly inequitable education across the state was what rose to the surface. And that there are inefficiencies in the way we deliver services. All of that came up to the surface. And so now what we're looking at is, how do we make sure that every single Vermonter has incredible opportunity to get the education that we want all of our kids to get? And how do we make sure that it's happening in every corner of the state? And how do we do that in a way that is efficient and at a price that we can afford? And what we hear is it's not going to be easy if we maintain things exactly the way, well, I guess I shouldn't say it like that. We can't do it if we don't change something. It's not working today. Something has to change. So we have to figure out what that is and how to do it. Very long answer to a
Thank you,
question.
Edie. I would just add that we were all fairly frustrated that the work that we're doing doesn't actually encompass looking at cost drivers. We're not looking at healthcare. We're not looking at facilities. We're not looking at those really critical mental health in schools and social services, et cetera. That's not part of our purview, unfortunately. So that we're not doing that. So again, I think it's going to be up to the legislators to really be thinking about cost drivers as we move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question is, what impacts do you see for non-school families and businesses in small towns that lose their schools?
We don't know if there will be any schools that will we don't know if any communities will lose schools. And as I said earlier, closing schools is not part of the purview of our task force. So that is not something that we are planning. It's not something that we're drawing into our maps or our plans. So the closure of schools is, again, not part of the task that we've been given.
The next one is from Danville School District. It says, we, Danville, Cabot, Twinfield, are being told locally that Act 73 may be modified in this upcoming session, and that language may reappear that forces new choice towns to choose up to 3 designated sending schools, but all of those schools have to be private. This was removed from the legislation last year. Every instance of this being said leads back to a single source. Have you heard this? Is this true? If this is true, how is it equitable to have multiple types of school choice?
I'll just quickly speak to the fact that there was language originally in the bill that talked about designating 3 public schools if a public school closes. That language was taken out. And, this is a good question because really what it comes down to is the legislative process. So anyone who is going out and saying this legislation is going to happen, I would say that's a bit of a dog whistle, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen in the legislature. We don't. Oh, thank you. You meant public. Okay. Thanks, Clayton. Even if there is a bill, and I don't know of a bill at this point, but even if there is a bill, it will go to the committee of jurisdiction, let's say Senate Education or House Education. It then has to be voted on by those members of that committee. It has to get through the committee on a majority vote and then go to the full body for the vote. So if there's anyone out there saying that this is a guarantee or this is
Hustle, Octavia. Let's go.
I don't know if she was cheering me on, but if she was, thank you. I like that. Yeah, so if anyone is saying that this is a done deal, I would just push back. It has to go through the whole legislative process, and we have no idea what the outcome of that would be.
Thank you. Next question, the next set of questions has to do with school district consolidation. There's one question about the number of board members for each district. I think we've already answered that. You already answered that one, that's up to the voting ward working group. The next one is, when will there be financial modeling to prove that making super large districts will achieve financial savings?
So I'm going to address this. We, as a task force, got a bill that said, come up with districts that are 4,000 to 8,000 students where possible. We were not given any information about how it impacts financially or anything else. I am hopeful that there is modeling happening. What I will say is we're looking at what makes sense for the future of Vermont. We're looking at district sizes that make sense. You know, we obviously have to follow the legislation. So if 4,000 to 8,000 is what works in some parts of the state, then that's going to work in some parts of the state. Do we understand that Vermont is rural and it's not going to work in all parts of the state? Yes. Financial modeling, if you get it, please send it to me. I would love to see it.
And I'll just add, that we had that cost drivers conversation, and in our task force, one of the first meetings that we had, we identified the fact that we don't know if making bigger districts is actually going to save us money. Like, there's not a lot of evidence for us to draw on that conclusion, and there's not a lot of evidence to draw that bigger districts mean better outcomes. So we did identify that right off the bat in one of our first meetings.
So you're muted.
So you're muted.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. The next question is, does the task force want school boards to present them with a preferred neighboring candidate or candidates for consolidation?
We had that at our last meeting. We had some three neighboring district and supervisory unions send us a letter saying, we want to work together. You are working with another education unit. I'm not sure how to talk about it. Yeah, we want to know. That's important.
Next is a question, or I'll get to the question. I think it's a little bit of a statement first. It seems to totally disregard rural schools. The size of our service area is already a major issue in terms of student transportation and administration. Because of the exceptional leaders we have and have had in the past, our SU is fiscally responsible and able to meet the needs of our students and citizens. Absorbing another district or two would be an almost impossible task. How can you believe this is a better system?
I think we addressed this already. I think we've talked about the fact that rural 4,000 might not work. There might be districts that are right sized. There might not. We don't know, and we don't know how this is. We're going to put maps together. The legislature is going to look at them and say, "Oh, that makes sense," or "Oh, that doesn't make sense." So, yeah, we get it. There's so much unknown. There's so many questions. I also want to apologize. I have a cold that is lingering and I keep coughing, and please don't take that as anything other than me trying to catch my breath. So apologies.
Next one is, what are the specific reasons that administrators and school boards share for being opposed to the option of supervisory unions?
I'll take this as someone who's not an expert on supervisory unions at all. I am just listening to people and trying to glean as much information and knowledge as I can. So I would say, and Dawn, I'm happy to speak to you one-on-one about this at some point if you'd like, but generally what we've heard from superintendents and other educators who are hyper focused on student achievement, student experience, outcomes, they point to the fact that it's sometimes hard to have a cohesive experience for students in a supervisory union, that it sometimes can be disjointed and it takes sort of more time to get kids acclimated to various schools and the culture of the school and the curriculum, et cetera, when they're coming in from different other school districts at various times in their educational experience. So for me, that was one of the more compelling reasons. We've heard about inefficiencies. We've heard about multiple school boards over hundreds of miles in the course of every month as something that's really hard for superintendents. We've heard that it's difficult to focus on instruction when superintendents and other school leaders have to be focusing on this sort of administrative piece of leading schools, teachers, and students. So I would just say those are sort of like those are things that I keep hearing over and over again at this point. And we're likely going to be digging into that question a little bit more in our upcoming meetings.
I'm going to add to that. When you hear from the business office managers, they share the costs associated with the supervisory union far exceed the costs of a school district, which means less money goes to instruction. So it's an overhead, more overhead, less money for students. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind as well.
I also just want to add, because it is a good question. We have heard from a few superintendents who said they have been able to create a cohesive experience within an SU. But it's also been this Herculean task that probably not all superintendents would be capable of achieving. So, and then they acknowledge that they have to go to 17 meetings a month, and that's a problem. So I wanted to share that we have heard that it is possible to have a good experience in an SU for students. It's just that much more work and administrative burden.
The next question has to do with the 4,000 to 8,000, which you've already talked about a little bit, but the question is, as you know, Act 73 requires the commission to recommend districts or supervisory unions with 4,000 to 8,000 students where practical. How will you decide what is practical?
I actually think that's a great question because we have not defined the word practical in our task force. We have not had the time to dig into that particular term. So I do think it's a good question. I would say that I don't know if I'm speaking for the task force right now. Yeah, I think I'm speaking for the task force when I say many of us on the task force understand that 4,000 to 8,000 is simply not realistic for many parts of our state. So we have acknowledged that. And I think acknowledging it sort of gives us the freedom to do what we think is best and what is right in those parts of the state where, you would have to have a massive district with hundreds and hundreds of miles of square miles of land to get to that 4,000 or to even get close to it. So we have not come up with a specific definition, but I will bring that up at the next meeting because it is a good question. Thanks.
Thank you. This one is for a small district that currently has school choice for high school. If it were to join with a neighboring district to form a supervisory district that includes one or more public high schools, would there be a possibility for the small district to retain high school choice?
We're working on it. We don't have an answer yet. I know exactly what you want to hear, no clarity, but sorry, we don't have an answer yet.
Okay, let me get to the next one. It has a little bit of preamble, but I will get to a question. The task force's job has much in common with Act 46. A very limiting factor with Act 46 was bans of mergers of districts with different school choice structures. My SU has one district serving two towns that operates grades pre-K through 6, and another district serving 9 towns that operates grades pre-K through 8. Those districts weren't allowed to merge under Act 46 unless one agreed to change its choice structure, which wasn't going to happen. That was a major impediment to mergers that made a lot of sense and that communities could have supported. Constitutional concerns of equal access were cited, but isn't it reasonable to ask why it shouldn't be possible? Why not allow the two boards to merge while also allowing each town to grandfather its current school choice options?
So I think you bring up an interesting concept, which is grandfathering something for a certain time period, right? For a transition period. And that's probably, I'm speaking for myself, can't speak for anybody else at this point, probably something we will have to look at for districts that have different structures. The law is the law. We can change some of it, but the courts get to rule and the courts get to decide what equal make sure that we have equal access, equal opportunity. We know we don't have that right now across the state. We know we have to do better. We're going to work toward that. So.
Thank you. The next set of questions are about school district size, and you have talked about this a little bit. I don't know if there's any more you want to say. The questions really focus on where is the science that shows districts of 4,000 to 8,000 students are the most effective? It says, how did you come up, but how did the legislature come up with the 4,000 to 8,000 number? And then there's a point about that size not working for rural communities.
I don't think we have anything to add on that.
Okay, we're moving on to a section on the necessary support and resources from the Agency of Education. And the question here is, you may have answered this one already. What financial modeling has been done to suggest that big savings will happen with larger districts?
We haven't seen any. I'll be honest, Carrie, I know that's from you, that we have not seen modeling that suggests that larger districts will necessarily save money. I think by the end of the legislative session, the hope was that whatever we come up with might bend the cost curve over time. But in terms of like an immediate savings of money, there wasn't any. We didn't see it.
The next one has to do with PCBs. We are currently facing PCB remediation issues and have yet to see full reimbursement. The recommendation is to replace some buildings. Where is the money for a rebuild?
That's a great question. I've had my high school closed because of PCBs, and I've sat on 2 school construction task forces. So I would just say that at this point, I am feeling very reluctant to support any map that does not include some kind of school construction aid. I think it would be very, very problematic for personally myself and for the task force and the legislature to get behind a plan that doesn't include some kind of assistance for school construction. So what that's going to look like, I don't know. One of the task forces that I was on did create a special fund for school construction. So it does exist. We have to find a way to raise some money to fund not just the repair of some schools, but possibly the building of new schools. I think that's going to be critical. I also wanted to point folks who have questions about PCBs to the Vermont Department of Health webpage. They have a whole page dedicated to PCBs in schools. And if you want to know what's happening, I would check that page out. It's quite it's full of good resources. Thanks.
Thank you. The next one is, do you believe that there is a general understanding that any consolidation plan will necessitate other changes in education statutes and that there is an appetite to do that work?
So I'm going to say that I ran for office after being on a school board and watching the legislature zigzag through education policy and change the law year after year without follow through, without having a long-term plan. And I wanted to be in the room to say, stop that. That's not okay. It's not good for kids. It's not good for schools. We're not doing ourselves any good by doing that. So I am not going to stop fighting. I don't know that one voice is enough, but I'm not going to stop fighting for that to make sure that we can just get some consistent policy that we can get traction on. And I think we need an agency that has a vision for the future of education in Vermont and works to implement that and works with the legislature to ensure that the policies that are put forward only work toward that vision. I'm incredibly frustrated that there aren't more voices like mine and like Martine's that are saying that, but there are, there's a core, 20 of us, probably 25 of us, I see another rep on the, on Rep Christie's on the line. I mean, he's in the same, we're in this, we're getting some traction. We're working on it. So it's really important.
Yeah, I would just add that I was shocked when I first was on the Senate Education Committee to find that the state of Vermont doesn't have a strategic plan. I don't know about you all, but being on a school board, our school district has a strategic plan that we refer to all the time, that we hearken all the time, that we share with our community all the time. And the fact that the state of Vermont doesn't have one, I found that pretty shocking. And one of the things we hear from educators and folks who work in the system a lot is like, please stop piling legislation upon legislation. It is really hard for us to be constantly pivoting when you just keep adding this additive mentality with legislation. And it's time that we look at all of our statutes and maybe, take some of those out that aren't working or that should be sunset. And as Edie said, just really thoughtfully think about that we're all moving in the same direction when we do pass legislation, and that it's doable and manageable.
Okay, we're getting toward the end. We have a few more. This one is about the necessary supports needed if our school district size increases, and it says supports include administration, busing, special needs, and sports practices and competitions? Question mark.
Edie, do you want to speak to?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I think that we need an agency that supports schools in a completely different way. I think the number is 35 staff that the agency used to have that supported better education for teachers, better district function that we don't have today, that we used to have 35 more staff just to do that aren't doing that job today. And I think that if we were able to provide those supports statewide, schools would have more resources to do the things that they need to do on a day-to-day basis. They wouldn't have to figure. I was in a meeting today where there was districts trying to figure out how to put a PLP plan together that works with some kind of technology, and they're still trying to figure out what technology will support them in a PLP. We need an agency that makes that easy for districts to implement and supports them through that implementation. And the schools just have to implement it and make sure their students are supported. And that's not happening today. And so I think there's a way to do this that isn't solving for all of these other things. It's taking the pressure off of districts and giving them the supports that they truly need so we don't have to figure out how to make a wheel in every single district across the state.
And we did have Superintendent Sherry Sousa come and present to us yesterday and her BOCES model. And we are looking at a BOCES model that might give us some cost savings and efficiencies in sort of the administrative level, sharing resources across larger areas. Stay tuned.
Thanks. As I said, we're down to the last 3 or 4 questions. Will the task force consider including supervisory unions in 2 or 3 map options to present to the legislature for their review?
We're required to make sure that we have SUs in one map. So we will make sure that we have SUs in one map. I can't speak to the second or third because we're not there yet.
Okay, next is regardless of which redistricting is chosen, what is the expected lead time and process to ensure that boards and superintendents are in place for the new districts by July 1, 2028, when they are expected to go fully into effect?
That is the district ward committee. So they start meeting tomorrow.
Next is, will the task force allow SUs to stay as SUs? If not, what is the determining factor or factors being used to change SUs to SDs?
Yeah, we're doing maps. We may comment on governance. that's really, we talk about what our scope is, and given the 4 months that we have to do the work, so that's really a little bit out of our scope.
Just as a quick example, we saw CTE maps yesterday, and when we asked, are these districts or supervisory unions, the folks who presented that map said they were agnostic on that fact. So, yeah, it's unclear how to handle that issue at this point.
All right, this is the last one that was submitted ahead of time. You are in the process of collecting input on redistricting from chairs of all school districts in Vermont. That is a lot of input. How do you intend to use that input as a task force? Are you going to share with the public that input or some sort of summary of the input received?
So I want to say two things about this first before I answer the question. First, I want to thank the VSBA for being the lead on putting the survey together and working with us on it, but putting it together and getting it out to all of you and then collating the information. We are trying to do so many things, we couldn't do it without them. Second, I want to apologize to all of the school boards and school board chairs out there for any frustration, anxiety, any negative anything that this caused, because I think a lot of people, including me and my district, were like, oh my gosh, how do we engage with the community? We have 3 weeks. What do we do now? How do we make this work? Who can we get to come talk to us? And took a breath. I mean, truly, like I sent my leadership group into a tailspin, putting a survey together and then deciding not to send it out. So I'm apologizing to all of you for doing if any of you chose to do that or went through that process also. We're just going to get a snapshot from you. What are you doing? What are you not doing? Have you been thinking about this? Are you not thinking about this? It's just going to be helpful. I mean, it will be more helpful to get more information, but just to know that there are parts of the state that are thinking about this and working on this and want to work with their neighbors, that's helpful information. It's helpful information for us to know that there are parts of the state that don't want that and aren't working on that and feel very strongly about that. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to make the information available to you? Yes, we will have raw data available to us as a task force at our meeting on the 10th. All of it will be included in our report, so you can see all of it then as well. And thank you for putting the time into filling out the survey. It's helpful to us. All of this feedback is helpful to us. We didn't talk about it, I don't think, maybe. The Commission on the Future of Public Education is also putting a survey out that is not just to board members, it's to every single person in the state to share information about schools. That came out yesterday. It is going to be starting to be distributed this week. I'm sure the VSBA will be sending that one out as well. So apologies again for the survey fatigue, but only school board chairs are doing more than one. So, you know, we're going to go back to this timeline, right? 4 months is not enough time. We know it's not enough time, but we're going to do our best to get the information that we need to do the work that we've been tasked to do.
Can I respond to something that's in the chat real quick, which is, I know someone's mentioned that there's a lot of data around consolidation. Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest that there's no data around consolidation. I meant to say that the what it tells us is not always clear. It doesn't seem to be definitive in one direction or another. But no, I did not mean to insinuate that there's no data on school consolidation. There's a lot.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you one last question. It's from the chat, and I thought it would be helpful to put it out there to you. It's, can we hear more about the task force's work to create equitable outcomes for students? Is the task force using an equity tool? Has this come up in discussion?
We are not using an equity tool. We are aware that the word equity is, you know, it's a tough one, and we haven't defined it. It was a word that was used a lot by the Secretary of Education and by the administration, and it got sort of tied in with cost savings and bending the cost curve. But no, we have not been able to define the word, and it's something that we have I know Edie and we are aware of that weakness in everything that we're doing when it comes to equity. So it's a great question. We do not have a tool. So yeah, that is not a very satisfying answer, but that's what I'll say for now.
And I'll just add to that, we're looking at two different things, right? We're looking at equity of opportunity. So we have high schools across the state that have no AP classes, no honors classes, very little opportunity to do co-curriculars. And we have high schools in the state that have A teams and B teams and varsity teams and every single honors class you could take and access to so many different programs. So that's one of the things we're looking at when we're talking about equity. We want to make sure that equity and opportunity and education is there. And what Martine is talking about is that in our assessment tool, we need to add something else about equity in voice and equity in underrepresented populations. And we know that we're not doing as good of a job in that lens as we would like to do. So we appreciate that folks have called us out on that or called us in on that, and we're going to keep working on it.
Thank you so much to both of you for all of your time with us tonight. I would like to hand the microphone over to Flor Diaz-Smith, the president of the Vermont School Boards Association Board of Directors, for some concluding remarks.
Thank you.
We
Sue.
have time for one more.
Oh, who was that?
Sorry, I put one in the chat because I thought that's where we were looking. Do we not have time for one more?
Jackie, we're happy to speak with you outside of this meeting. I think you're asking a lot of good questions. Can you email Edie and myself?
Thanks, Jackie. I told everybody that we were going to try to have you out at 7, and we want to respect everybody's time. So as we come to a closing tonight, I first want to extend our deepest gratitude to Senator Martine and Representative Edie for joining us today. Sorry to use your first names, but I have great respect for you guys, and we've been working together. Thank you for everybody else that was here for your thoughtful questions and for engaging with us in this meaningful conversation. We look forward to continue to collaborate with the school district redistricting task force, that's a mouthful, as they conclude the report on December 1st. And we are grateful for this extra time that they are spending with us. It is really important work. For the school board chairs that are here, please complete the survey by October 6th. You have the questions too, and I know that it's not perfect, the timing, but please complete that survey. That would be important information for them. And then while the challenges before us in Vermont are complex, Vermont children depend on us, and they depend on us staying thoughtful, committed to the long-term success of all of our schools. Together, there's no other option, right? The issues are complex. We have to work together so that we can ensure that every student in Vermont feels valued and everyone has a voice and every community is engaged in shaping a brighter future for Vermont. I also want to encourage you today to pay attention to our resolutions and join our resolutions, our meeting in October, and also join our October conference. And I can see on the screen, thank you, Debbie. I also want to encourage you to please check, especially today, your Vermont School Boards update on the association. There was a small action alert from National School Boards, where I also serve as your Eastern representative. It is really important that you take action today. So please do that. And on behalf of the VSBA, we thank you for your service, your dedication, and your ongoing commitment for the vitality of all of our public schools in Vermont. It is truly an honor and I speak from the board, we all really, it's an honor to serve alongside you, and we're here to serve you. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Sue.
Thank you, Flor. At this point, we will end the meeting and thank you all for attending.